So then I'd like now to turn to Wayne Westner. As you remember, he's the tree guy. He was with us last week, and this week he's with us again to talk about weathering, in particular rust weathering. So Wayne, thanks so much for coming back. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim, for having me on again. And I'm just going to cover a few of the things. And what I want to say is I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do weathering rust. And I'm going to cover some of the products. And I don't endorse these products. It's just some of the things I use. And I'm sure that many of you use other things as well. And one thing I found about rusting and weathering, especially rusting, is I always was afraid, things look so nice and neat and clean. And I don't like that nowadays for my own modeling. And I found for me, I had to just tell myself, let nothing but fear stop me from trying to weather up a model. And I use a variety of things. These are the AIM products. I have several different products of weathering powders that I use. I'll use a lot of these with, sometimes I'll dab a little bit of alcohol and dab some powder, and I can kind of drag it out pretty decent. I'm a very avid user of, I guess someone you're familiar with, the Hunter stains. And I use a lot of Rick's stains, just of interest. Rick and I are probably about 10 kilometers away from each other, so we're really close. And for those of you that are in miles, that's about 6 miles, so it's very close. I don't know if these are even available anymore. I bought these years ago and I still use them, and it's amazing. You keep the caps on nice. The Floco markers are really nice sometimes to weather things up as well. And for those of you that are not familiar, they're a pen type. They're if you're familiar with furniture touch-up pens, that's sort of what they're like, only they're in colors like rust and grime and dirt and those kinds of things. I even use acrylic paints, which I'll thin down, burnt umber, burnt sienna, and use them as washes. But I guess some of my favorite go-tos are the model paints, the model colors, model air, Velarja, and something I think many of us overlook is the Army war paints, because they have some really unique things that you can use. And of course, the one on the left, there's a transparent wood grain. If you look, there's quite a few transparent paints that'll work. And I added the green here, which has nothing to do with what I do with weathering, but you'll notice on the side of the green one, I have a little green sticker. And what that is when I take all my paints or my stains, I take about a 1/4 inch wide piece of scale lumber, about a 1/2, 3/4 inch long, and I'll paint it or I'll stain it, and I tape it on my bottle. And that way, you know exactly sort of what it's going to look like on a wood product, at least. These are some of the war paints, and it's surprising you can work these in really well. The plate metal, the rough iron, and the gunmetal ones. The rough iron one I use lots if I'm doing some metal parts, and then you can weather on top of that. It starts out looking like cast iron in a way, and you can weather on top of those. The other thing I use quite a few of is these model washes, and these are both an old and a new rust, oxide rust and a light rust. And you can thin these on layer because there's not a lot of color in them, but I sure find that sometimes these are really, really kind of nice to get some some layered rust. As you've seen in the very first picture, this is a Shea. It's an HON3, and I'm doing, although I model ON30, I'm doing some HON3 little modules because for years I modeled HON3, and I want this to sit somewhere behind the engine house as a dilapidated, no longer used engine. And I didn't want to over-weather it, but I wanted to weather it enough that it looks like it's sort of been sitting in the weather for a long time and not in use anymore. This is another HON3. This was probably a roundhouse, I think, that it's sort of lightly weathered. And actually, if any of you have been to, and some of you are, of course, not able to go, but if any of you have been to Cuba, this is kind of what their engines all look like that they're still using down there. They're, you can sort of see what they are, but they're sort of well weathered. Here's another little project, a water tank, and quite rusty because over the years, and the front part, you've noticed I use a product, one of the model colors called Wood, and it's a really good simulation of wood, and then you weather over top of it, and it makes a really nice finish. One of the things I still use today, and I know they're not available, is the driftwood that Floco used to make, and I still have quite a bit of it, and I like to put driftwood over a color. The downside, of course, is that it's a solvent-based product, which is about the only solvent-based product I use today. Here's some 1/24 scale barrels. They're actually wooden barrels. They come very plain. I put a few spigots on them. The one on the right I've weathered up. You've noticed I've set it up on a board and tilted. I learned that from when I was growing up on the farm. My dad used to tilt these over so that the rim on top sits up so you wouldn't get too much water on. You'd get only water on the edge. And that's what I did with this one. I've poured a little of the resin water on the edge here, and then kind of rusted it up a little bit underneath, so it gives that look that water has been sitting there and sort of rusting up, and then run down some light washes along it with rust. I think the next one is these are O-scale barrels, and there are a variety of products. These unfinished ones are Grant lines, so just to show you an idea of what they are. And I end up starting doing the typical, the red and white, blue and white, and there are all kinds of different colors. If you look online, you'll get some really nice pictures of barrels that you can try and copy. Start to weather them up a little more, the red and white weathered up, the blue and white. Here's one that I've actually replaced the top with a thin piece of paper that it's really hard to see in this picture, but I've ripped up a little piece so it's actually rusted. When rust sometimes lifts the metal up, and it looks really quite realistic. And here is a little more close-up of some of those. I'm not afraid sometimes to punch holes in, which happens, and cut pieces out. And here would have been a silver barrel that was quite rusted. This probably would have had oil in it because I did a lot of black on it. Couple of more just sort of examples. These three on the left are O scale, and then we have HO scale on the right. And there's just some detailed products where I've taken a wooden barrel and used that wood model color and sort of washed it over with underline stains and then run some rust and black along the metal rings around. And a similar sort of here. This is a barrel with junk in. This is sort of almost clean, but the wood part is sort of weathered up again with hunter line. And that's a sack, and that'd be O-scale sack that I've painted off and just put some sort of lettering on to give it some weathered. I'm out of screen here. Weathered look. Here I've gone a little further with some of those, and I've cut some barrels off so they look like they're half sitting in the ground, and they'd be sitting in a place where maybe there was a mucky or a slough or a water area. This one I just cut a corner off, so it's just like it's sunk in the ground. And again, sometimes if you go online and check, there's some barrels are just total rust. This is almost like it's a burn barrel, and there's wood pieces in there yet. And a barrel, of course, with all kinds of odds and ends that you find on the workbench. And there's a little bit closer looks at those one. This one actually, sometimes you look at burn barrels, it's kind of typical of what they are. And what I do is I find those pictures and I print them off and just try and after a little bit of practice, you can soon duplicate those kinds of things. Here's something I built probably when I was just a beginner, probably about 35 or more years ago, using a scribed metal. It's a lean-to shed, and not weathered maybe as much as it should, but not too old of a building. This is a builder's and scale, and you may recognize it. And what I did here is it actually was painted white, and I used the driftwood, Floco driftwood, to kind of wash over it as a wash, and to kind of give it that grade type look. I got a couple more here. These are HON3 log cars, and I guess you need to see more of the side to see the rust, but what I always do is make sure I rust up all the bolt details, the couplers, any plates that there may be on it. And the other thing to detailing is, add junk as you can. And here is one more look at those more from the side. And I guess all I'm saying is don't be sort of afraid to try and add some rust to it, because it looks weathered, and it depends on what era again you're modeling. A more modern or newer era isn't going to have the amount of rust. I model a lot of old logging mining, so some of it's pretty beat up and rusted and grubby. And that's about it for me today. And thanks for letting me participate, Jim.